Hi folks, Puffin here with your Antifa News Briefa for March 1st, 2022. This one's about Putin's failing war in the Ukraine. And first I wanted to say blessings and rest in peace to all the people who have been killed in this war so far, and blessings to all their families and people who have been displaced. Hundreds of people have been killed, maybe thousands of people have been killed, and tens of thousands or millions of people have been displaced and affected. Many millions of people have been affected in some way. And thanks to everybody helping out, taking in refugees, all sorts of things like that. It's really sad. War is always sad. And as an Antifa perspective, I would say we're against war. Because war is fascist. It's always perpetuated by some sort of fascist, in this case Putin. And I want to get into somewhat of his motivations, if possible. He's kind of a madman, as people have been describing. But talk about the way he operates. And first I wanted to say that it didn't have to happen. There's no reason to have war at all, but especially this war didn't have to happen. War's been shown to be unnecessary more and more lately. And the more we can show of war, kind of like our terrible police practices in America, the more it's recorded and shown, the more we see that it's a problem. It's just a problem. It's mostly a problem. It's something we need, in the case of war, something we need to get rid of entirely. And this is a perfect example of that. But it's kind of even worse than we expected. In one way, it's not worse because at least Putin's losing his war. I think in some ways it was expected that he would quickly take over Ukraine because they have a lot of military power in Russia. But the way it's being conducted is crazy, and the soldiers apparently don't know what they're doing. Like, not just because they're not trained, but they're not being told what they're doing. They're not being told where they are. That's one thing that was kind of surprising to me to learn just a few minutes ago. I heard a news report that the Russian soldiers don't know what country they've been sent to. They don't know who they're fighting against. And one thing that made a lot of news, I think, was when they said, we don't know who we're fighting against. They look like us. Well, it's kind of weird, that as if to suggest if they looked differently, we would know who we were fighting against. That's kind of racist or strange, but also just goes to show that they shouldn't be fighting against these people who are, everybody's one people, so nobody should be fighting against each other. But it gets into this idea of, does Putin know where he is? Does he know that Ukraine is not Russia? And maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's lost it in that sense. Definitely speaking about using nuclear power, I think he lost it in that sense, or taking Chernobyl and taking the people in hostage and working in Chernobyl hostage, seems to have lost it in that sense. But what I really wanted to kind of question more than try to explain or explore is Putin's motivations, because he'd taken over 3 big countries and probably lots of little countries before he did this. He took over USA, Brazil, and India, as far as I can tell, and a bunch of other countries. I think Israel, I think Netanyahu was a Putin puppet. Trump and Bolsonaro and Modi, as far as I can tell, Putin puppets. And they have very good documentation of how he's used social media, Facebook especially, and Twitter, to make candidates popular and take over countries and have these puppets who you can tell are his puppets because they do exactly what each other do. Bolsonaro is called Trump of the tropics for a reason. And so that's one reason I've been advocating arresting Trump. I mean, been advocating him long before this, having Trump put in jail for his crimes. But in this sense, to send a message to Putin that we're not Putin up with his stuff. But Putin had taken over these countries, and I guess in some sense, they're going to arrest Bolsonaro, hopefully, or charge him with genocide, crimes against humanity, for what he did, what Putin had him do in Brazil, what Putin had Trump do here to spread the Trump virus and make it a genocide. They're charging him there. Maybe he felt like we're getting around to charging Trump here, and he's got to do something else to, distract or change the narrative or something like that. Maybe he thought he would win. I mean, I think a lot of people thought that he was going to quickly win this war, and really it's been losing in a big and dramatic fashion. And it's really sad when you think about it, because it's not like a game. It's not like a video game where Putin's losing thousands of troops. Those are thousands of young Russian kids, young Russian boys, I imagine, for the most part, getting killed. And it's really sad to think. I mean, it's nice that people can protect themselves, but it's sad to think that when they're blowing up these tanks and stuff and dropping Molotov cocktails on these tanks, some of these kids probably don't even know they were going to war. They think they were going to like an exercise or something. So it's really sad that Putin lied to them in that way, but it's also par for the course for Putin, because he apparently came to power through attacking his own citizens, or having, his KGB agent buddies orchestrate attacks on their own citizens in Moscow and blaming it on Chechen rebels and all this stuff that, he's always done. We saw how he did it to get Trump in power, and how he did it through Trump. Everything Trump did was create crises that he sometimes solved, or just kept creating crises and, lying all the time. But eventually you can't lie about everything. It reminds me, right before the actual invasion started, when everyone's anticipating it, or maybe just in the very first day, but real early on, a news reporter was asking somebody from maybe Germany or another country, what European country, what the protest to gas prices, how that would affect, how people's grumblings about gas prices would affect the country's response. And when he asked that question, it made me think about how Putin has so much control over trolls. Has, the trolls that you hear that have their voices are amplified, a million times on social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook, and mostly Facebook, but YouTube too. These trolls' voices that are amplified so much, they're all spouting Putin propaganda. They're all Trump Putineers. So for these trolls to have that power on Facebook, it makes people in the media think, well, they represent a large portion, but they don't. People aren't like that. People aren't like the way they are online, when 90% of the content you see is from right-wing trolls who only represent 3% of the population. People aren't like that. And yet the conversations we have to accommodate that loud voice that's been trolled and amplified up through social media. But yeah, they asked him, what'll happen if people protest the higher gas prices, or protest the results of these sanctions on Russia or whatever. And they're like, people aren't protesting. People, or, not just the people aren't protesting, because I'm sure some people have been talked into it by Trump Putineers. But, we're ready for this. We're committed as the human race to stamp out, tyrants and aggressors. Now, to me, like I said, Putin had these countries under his control, and now they've fallen out of his control, thankfully, since then. But he has these campaigns and tricks of doing things that way. Why would he throw it all away like this in this military adventure that's foolish and costly, and hopefully is going to backfire on him and cost him his power entirely? Just crazy, I guess, just losing it. That's the best explanation. And that's what's scary about him also now threatening nuclear stuff. It's like, let's not wait to try to respond to that. Let's go ahead and put full pressure from everyone to say, you're done. Recall your troops. It didn't work out. Resign, whatever. Like, do something less embarrassing. But anyway, good job to Ukraine for fighting back again against war in principle. When people bring war to you, then it seems like the thing to do. Unfortunately, that's one of the results of this, is that it sells weapons, or it sells the idea of war or nuclear weapons or whatever. It sells these ideas more than they need to be. What's really opposing Putin? I mean, it's great that people are opposing the force with force, so that they don't get killed, so there's not a terrible massacre there. At the same time, what's really opposing him is the documenting of it, and the showing how terrible this whole idea of war is. And now the documenting of these details, like the soldiers don't even know where they're going. So this guy was asking just driving by, a Ukrainian guy driving by in his car, asking the guy in the tank, why is your tank stopped? He's like, we're out of gas. Do you even know where you're going? No, you're going to Kiev. That's where you're headed. That's where, we don't know where we're going. And it's sad thinking that those people are getting killed when they get there, and they might think they're on an exercise. They might not even know they're at war. That's not really the best excuse, because probably most of them do. But do they know what they're at war for? No. because whatever Putin's told them is a lie. It's not true. And you can't do anything based on not truth. But war is the worst thing to be doing anyway. It's always untrue. We can do something better. So let's do it together. And let's save the world. Pillow Revolution is the hashtag I have, because I feel like the revolution we need to have is one we can have. We can all do it from bed. If we can't do it from bed, we're working too hard. But the way we can network and do things together, we can stop the bad guys together. And I do think that the good thing about Putin doing this is it rallies the rest of the world against this evil and exposes the people that are still with him, like Trump. Thanks for watching. Let's end all that evil. Have a good day.